Good morning, friends and brethren. Very good to see you today. A good number with us again. Several visitors. We're glad to see you. Sure. Got a couple announcements I need to start with this morning. Good announcements. I always have to keep starting with announcements when it's time to deliver a sermon, but sometimes you have to take your turn to make some announcements to do that. But they're good things. Something that I enjoyed and appreciated so much being with the church here is that Ben and I frequently sit and talk with the elders about various things. And just this week, one of the things we were talking about is the problem that some are having finding a place to sit. That's a good problem to have. We can't complain about that. But what we have noticed is that sometimes when visitors come in, they're having a hard time finding a place to sit, and that's not a good thing. Because if you can imagine being a visitor, and as you come in, most of the time visitors come in on this side over here, closest to the door, and they're looking for a place to sit. And sometimes they struggle. They may have come up to the front somewhere. Some visitors just won't. Some are too uncomfortable to do that. Some might even leave. And we sure don't want that. So what the elders are asking is that we might think about making a little shift here over toward this way. Particularly back here on this side here, if you're able, you can walk a little bit farther easily to kind of move over this way. There's some empty seats over on this side. And let's leave some room for our visitors when they come in, that they can easily find a place to sit. I think we can handle that. Now, something else I want to tell you about is just kind of inform you of something that we've done this week. As we have done a number of times, we have sent relief for food to some of our brethren in Africa. And in fact, I can't remember now how many times we've done that, but just this week, $2,000 was sent to Zimbabwe, Africa, to buy some food for the brethren there. It's been a while since we've done that, and the reason for that being is they had some harvest. And so they've been doing fine on their own here for a while, but now what they have had has kind of come to an end until the next harvest comes and needing some help. So $2,000 was sent from the treasury this week to help with that. Now, the third thing I will mention to you is that if you've noticed on the back side of the bulletin, whether you looked at that online or if you picked up a copy of it, you'll find on the whole back side 31 days of prayer. In fact, earlier in the month, we had a theme lesson. I preached a lesson on prayer and some of the elements of that. And it's an encouragement for us to think about and remember to pray. Well, Ben's been working on 31 days of prayer. This is for the month of March, starting this week. So every day, here's what we'd like to do. Let's all be praying about something, the same thing, every day through the month of March. And so you just look here, and there's like for day one, it says unity in the local church. That's something to pray for. And there's a passage for us to read. Let's all do that. And every day, for the next month, starting on the first, every day we can be praying the exact same thing together. And so you take that bulletin, pick one up back here in the back, or print it off, and hang that up on the refrigerator at home, just to remind you. And let's be busy about praying about those things. So those are some things I need to share with you in this one. Leaders. Where do they come from? It's often a problem finding those who are good leaders, those who are willing leaders. And so we're the question, leaders, where did they come from? Sometimes we say of some people, man, he's just a born leader. And I think there are those who have that propensity, that ability just to be a leader, and it comes easier for them. But for most, it's not that easy. For most, leadership skills is something that's learned. It's something that they had to be trained. Several years ago, one of my nephews went through some pretty intense training in the Marines. There's a lot of survival skills that he had to learn, but a big part of what he was learning as well was leadership skills. And it was not, he told me about some of it later. It was hard. But what impressed me the most was some things that he learned about leadership that would help him in the Marines. It will help him just throughout life. And it was some very specific training. And the point being that sometimes to be a good leader, there are those who need to be trained. In fact, some of the best leaders are those who are trained to lead. Sometimes leadership is uncomfortable. Sometimes leadership places us in hard situations, and yet there are those times where someone really needs to lead. For a number of years on the fire department, we struggled always, it seems, to find good leaders. I mean, there were those always who were willing, they wanted to put captain's bars on their collar. But most of the times, the ones that desired the most were the ones that I really didn't want to have that. They weren't leaders. They didn't have good skill sets that way. And what was most discouraging is that we were willing to train, but very often they weren't really willing to devote themselves to the training needed to become good leaders. And that's necessary. And sometimes the ones that seem to have some of the best leadership skills, they didn't care about being leaders. And I grew to think over time that they were the smart ones. They just wanted to be told what to do. But the point being, we need leaders. And where do leaders come from? Being a leader is not easy. What if someone really important had confidence in us in some way and called us to a great task? How would we respond to that? The story goes of George H.W. Bush. Years before he became president, he was serving as an ambassador to China. And it was a role that he seemingly enjoyed and thought he would be in that role for some time. He'd been in some other leadership roles already, but there came one day a messenger carrying a hand-delivered letter, a handwritten letter from the President of the United States, Gerald Ford. And very simply, all it said was, "I would like you to become the director of the CIA." That's all it said. And Bush took that letter and he thought about it for a minute and he thought, that's not really what I was wanting to do next. That's really not what he thought would be his career path. But after thinking about it for a short time, he wrote back on that card. He said, if this is what the president wants me to do, then my answer is a resounding yes. He gave it to the messenger and off it went to Washington. And so did he. What would you do if somebody really important asked you to do something that was uncomfortable to you? Wanted you to take a leadership role that you really didn't know if you were ready for or not? Maybe you didn't even want to do that. But they had such confidence in you that they asked you to do that. How would you respond to that? I think we have a good example of that in the text, the biblical text. Exodus chapter 3. I want you to go there with me. We're turning to Exodus chapter 3, and we'll do some reading from there. Moses is called to leadership. And it doesn't appear to me that at this point in time in his life that he was really looking to make a change in his life. Moses was a shepherd, and he seemed to be content in doing that. He'd been doing that for 40 years or so. And then he received a call that at the very least we would say was unusual. And no doubt it got his attention. Moses at this point had led his sheep across the desert. He had come to the mountain of God. He had come to Sinai. Now, it's not the only time that Moses would approach God there. But this occasion would certainly gather his attention, capture it in just a profound way. Because it was here that Moses saw a burning bush. We're reading from the text, Exodus chapter 3, beginning verse 2. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over there and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called from within the bush, Moses, Moses. Moses said, here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And at this, Moses hid his face, because he was afraid to look at God. Can you imagine? Of course he was afraid to look at God. Here he was in the presence of God, the creator of all things.
I mean, it was not that Moses was cowardly as the reason for hiding his face, but it was because he was in the presence of God. God had appeared to his patriarchs before, to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and now to Moses. And so Moses is finding himself in a very elite group, one that would soon carry incredible responsibility. Again, I don't know that Moses was looking for that. Seemingly, he was pretty content being a shepherd. He's been doing that for a long time. But here it is God who is coming to him saying, I have something that I need you to do. Maybe it was because God saw in Moses some qualities that Moses didn't even see in himself. God was not setting Moses up for failure. That was not the place. That was not the purpose of what was happening. But God deemed Moses to have the faith required to go through with it, to do what God would have him do, to take care of the task at hand. And it was a big one. It was intense. Moses could do the work that Jehovah God needed accomplished because God would be on his side, and it was serious work. Verse 7. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them out of the land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites. And now the cry of Israel has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. Now, there's a couple of things here. Number one, you can't help but notice God's compassion, that he has heard the cries of his people, and that he's moved by that he's extending mercy to them. Mercy is in action right here. He heard their cry, and he was sending help. That help is going to come through Moses, the one that he is calling now. But Moses had, maybe we would say, a confidence problem. Or maybe it was a faith problem. I mean, like most of us, faith has to grow. And sometimes it's only when we are challenged that our faith can really grow. That we find ourselves willing to step up and to stand up and to go into an arena that we've not been in before, or to do something that we've not done before. Faith has to grow. And it's a process that comes over time. And we develop greater faith based on what God says. Real faith. I'm talking about true faith. The kind of faith that is saving faith is the faith that comes from God's word. In fact, that's the only place saving faith comes from. It's from God's word. And so as long as Moses is willing to hear, to listen to what God has to say, not only will his faith grow, but he can be assured that God will be with him. And whatever God has him or asks him to do, God will be with him in doing that. So Moses would have to grow in faith, and God will provide the means for that. God's word is what would move Moses to do and to say the things that he would say, and he would say things that he never imagined he would say. It was Moses who was going to stand before Pharaoh, one of the most powerful leaders of the world, the one who was keeping the Israelites enslaved. God would call on Moses to announce the plagues. Moses would be the one to stand before Pharaoh and tell Pharaoh about that. And one by one, those plagues would come to Pharaoh and the Egyptians. And it was Moses who would call upon Jehovah God to bring the plagues to an end. The place of Moses is integral in this whole story in what God would have him do. It was Moses who led the children of Israel through the parted waters of the Red Sea. Who could have seen that happen before? I mean, here you are. Moses is leading the children of Israel with obstacles one after another. God, through Moses, is going to provide a means to go through. Moses, who stood on the mountain of God and receives the promises of God and the commandments of God. This is what's in the future for Moses. Well, he doesn't know that yet. In fact, maybe sometimes it's good that we don't know everything that we are going to face in life, because we might not be ready. Or we might even say, no, I don't want that. That's not for me. But that sort of is what Moses says. Even before he knows all that's going to happen. Right now, Moses is struggling with the very idea of being God's chosen leader. Back to the text. Verse 11. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites to Egypt, out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you, and this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Moses said to God, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, what is his name? Then what should I tell them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. That is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. God said to Moses, say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, the name by which I am to be remembered from generation to generation. So here's the charge. Here's what Moses has in front of him. And Moses struggled for a while with the responsibility being placed on him. And he didn't sign up right away saying, I'm good with this. No, there's more to that story. And it took some work for Moses to be convinced that, in fact, he was that chosen one of God. But by faith, he would obey. It's just like what we read in Hebrews a few minutes ago, what Joseph read to us. By faith, the things that Moses did. And as his faith grew, he responded. And he did just as God would want him to do. And the point being here in the big picture is that Moses obeyed. And Moses stepped up to the responsibility that God was giving him. And he did that willingly. And he grew in faith, and he grew in ability to do just as God would have him do. Where do leaders come from? From men like Moses. Those who perhaps think of themselves as not being ready, or maybe not even wanting to change what they're doing, or thinking, I'm not prepared, I can't do this. When God says, yes, you can, we can. We can do what God would have us do. And so there's some observations I think we should make. Observations of the growing faith of Moses, and some applications that maybe we can use. There is the prayer of Moses. The prayer of Moses. There was no question that Moses had developed a very incredible relationship, close relationship with God. Moses was with God on the holy mountain when he learned about the sins of Israel. You know, when Moses had gone on the mountain, Aaron and the Israelites were there at the mountain, but they forgot about their purpose. In fact, they just forgot about Jehovah God, even, we would say, and they built a golden calf. And we can only imagine with that the disappointment of God, because God knew what they did. In fact, he tried to explain to Moses, these people that were left behind, do you know what they did? And God explained to Moses exactly what they did. Can we imagine the disappointment of God? These were the ones that God had rescued. These are the ones that God had brought out of bondage in Egypt, who had taken them across the desert through the parting of the Red Sea, that God has blessed and cared for along the way. And now already, so quickly, they have forgotten God. Can we imagine the disappointment of God? God was ready to destroy the people, every one of them. But it was Moses who would be the one who steps up and says to the Lord and pleads with them, prays to God to not destroy these people. Moses did not want to see his people destroyed, and he pleaded for his brethren. He prayed on behalf of Israel. A prayer from a man, should we remember, a prayer from a man who says, I'm not eloquent. I'm not good with words. I don't know what to say. Those are the excuses of Moses early on. And now here he is addressing Jehovah God as the leader of the children of Israel, pleading with God on their behalf. How different that is from the Moses who is begging God to find someone else to be their leader. We're looking over at Exodus chapter 32, if you look with me. Exodus chapter 32, we step along in the timeline just a little bit to the episode that we're talking about now. Exodus chapter 32, this incident with the golden calf. And we begin verse 11. But Moses sought the favor of the Lord his God. O Lord, he said, why should your anger burn against your people, whom you brought out of Egypt with great power and with a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians say, it is with evil intent that he brought them out, to kill them in the mountains and to wipe them off the face of the earth? Turn from your fierce anger, relent, and do not bring disaster on your people. Remember your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, to whom you swore by your own self. I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and will give your descendants all this land I promised them, and it will be their inheritance forever. And the Lord relented and did not bring on his people the disaster that he threatened. What about the relationship of Moses to God? I mean, when we consider this, what about that? The relationship of Moses to God is he was confident enough to approach Jehovah God about this very difficult manner, and that evidence is evident. This closeness is evident in this prayer. Not only had he grown closer to God, but he had grown as a leader of the children of Israel. The one who was the shepherd, the one who seemed content to stay out with the sheep, is now the leader of this great people. How things had changed and how Moses had changed, how he had grown, how his faith had increased. Prayer is an interesting indicator sometimes. Prayer is an interesting indicator of our relationship with God. The best leaders in scriptures had that relationship with God. And prayer was something that seemingly came easy to them and was something that they did often. Whether it was Moses or King David or even the early Christians, prayer was something that was very close and dear to them. And if we are going to be a leader among men, prayer is essential. It becomes very much a part of who we are. Think about King David. How many times in the Psalms where he prayed, hear my cry, O God, attend to my prayer, he says in the 61st Psalm. And of the Christians in the New Testament, when Peter had been cast in prison, and the disciples, the Christians, just like you and me, who were meeting together, and many were gathered together praying, Acts chapter 12 says. It's something that they did. And it was James that wrote in James chapter 5, the effective fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. Of course it does. When we have that closeness with God, when we have that relationship with God, as our faith grows, as we find ourselves in a position to see and understand some things that need to be addressed and prayed for, we can go to God. And we find comfort and help, direction. God blesses us. Follow the lead of Moses. His relationship with God is evident by his prayers. We can learn something right here from Moses, something more, and that is asking ourselves, are we praying? Is our relationship with God not as strong as it should be? I can almost guarantee our prayer life is probably not what it needs to be. Or maybe it is a lack of prayer that is the problem that keeps us from having the relationship with God that we should have. Follow the lead of Moses. Let's learn some things from him. And we think about this too. Moses took another step in leadership. When Moses saw the sins of Israel and the golden calf, this is just a pivotal point to me. When Moses saw the sins of Israel and the golden calf, Moses took an incredible stand. We're in chapter 32, Exodus chapter 32. We begin at verse 19. When Moses approached the camp, he saw the calf and the dancing. His anger burned, and he threw the tablets out of his hands, breaking them to pieces at the foot of the mountain. And he took the calf they had made and burned it in the fire. Then he ground it to powder and scattered it on the water and made the people drink from it. Okay, the picture of this in our minds. Moses has been on the mountain with God. And he's been gone a little while, and the people seemingly have forgot who Moses is. It seems as though they have forgot God is the one who has brought them out of bondage and brought them to this place, to this time. And their response to that is to Aaron, we need another God that we can follow. And as Aaron recounts this to Moses, they brought me gold earrings and we threw them in the fire and it came out like this, a golden calf. Well, yeah, I'm believing that. But we see where the people are at. And we can understand the disappointment of God when he looks out and he sees these people as they are and says to Moses, I'm ready to destroy them. And Moses pleads with God, no, don't do that. But then the disappointment of Moses when he comes down the mountain and he sees this for himself and he throws down the tablets that have come from the hand of God. And all that is. I mean, breaking the tablets in so many ways symbolic of what Israel had done. They had already broken their covenant with God. The covenant was no more. And Moses took a stand right now against the people who had rejected God. And so now there could be no doubt which side Moses was on. Aaron's excuses for the people and his excuses for his own actions went nowhere with Moses. And how Moses responds to that now is just incredible. Moses took a stand. In the text again. Chapter 32 and verse 25. Moses saw that the people were running wild and that Aaron had let them get out of control and so became a laughingstock to their enemies. So he stood at the entrance to the camp and said, whoever is for the Lord, come to me. And all the Levites gathered to him. And then he said, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Let each man strap a sword to his side, go back and forth through the camp from one end to the other, killing his brother and his friend and his neighbor. And the Levites did as Moses commanded. And that day about 3,000 of the people died. This is really not about Moses right now. It's not about what Israel tried to do. But right now, the choice and the decision is about who is for the Lord. That's what Moses was saying. It's a powerful statement. Who is for the Lord? A testimony of the mind and the heart of Moses. This is what the Lord knew. This is what God knew. Back there on Sinai, at the burning bush, when Jehovah God said to Moses, I need you. I want you to do something. I want you to lead my people. And even though Moses thought he couldn't do it, God knew he could. God understood and could see the faith of Moses. Moses has grown. Moses has developed. Moses is doing now some things that he never thought he could do. He's become that leader that God knew he could be. But what would we choose? I mean, can you even imagine? This is really hard to me. I can't even imagine being in the place of Moses in that time, seeing the things that he was seeing, having to make the choice, make the statement that Moses is just making, right? Who is for the Lord? It was a decision time. And yet decision time comes for all of us, you and me. Have we made the choice to stand with God? Who is for the Lord? That's the choice that we have to make. And it's a very definitive choice. To determine to walk with the Lord is not a decision that we just kind of back into. You know, there's been some circumstances and things that I faced in life that sometimes circumstances came around that I never saw coming. Sometimes good, sometimes not. I just kind of backed into the situation. Serving God is not like that in any way. We don't back into a relationship with God. It's a choice that we have to make. We have to go into that moving forward. It's something we have to decide to do. Another passage from Deuteronomy chapter 30. Deuteronomy chapter 30. I'm going to read from the text again, beginning of verse 19. You will follow me there. Moses in his last days spoke again to Israel. Deuteronomy 30 and verse 19. This day I call heaven and earth as witness against you that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life, so that you and your children may live, and that you may love the Lord your God, listen to his voice, and hold fast to him. For the Lord is your life, and he will give you many years in the land he swore to give your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Choose and live, is what he's saying. We cannot separate that life comes from a decision to walk with God. We have to make that choice. Real life, the life that matters, comes in a decision to serve him, to listen to God, to hold to him, as he says here, as Moses says, he is your life. Powerful words that teach us about both choice and hope. Both come with the Lord, and without him there is no hope. Moses became a leader that he could have never envisioned himself. Perhaps many around him could not have seen that in him either. But God did. We need leaders that will stand up and lead. We need that in the world, in society. We need that in the home. Husbands and fathers who are willing to stand up and lead and set the course for their homes, leading by the word of God. We need church leaders that will stand up and lead. Men who prepare themselves to be spiritual leaders, to serve as elders, as shepherds of the flock. And throughout all the world, we need servants of God who truly decide to be on the Lord's side, who decide that. As later Joshua would say, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Moses grew in that way and had such a very special relationship, close relationship with the Lord. One last text here. From Exodus chapter 33 at verse 12. Moses said to the Lord, you have been telling me, lead these people, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. You have said, I know you by name, and you have found favor with me. If you are pleased with me, teach me your ways so that I may know you and continue to find favor with you. Remember, this nation is your people. And the Lord replied, my presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. Here Moses is saying to the Lord, I know your plans. I know what you want me to do. Which Jehovah replies, I will go with you. Amazing. God is saying to Moses, I will go with you. Moses had become a leader, God's leader. And God helped him to learn and to grow and to lead his people. And God will help us too, to learn and to grow and to have a relationship with him, not only in this life, but a relationship that lasts throughout eternity. But it has to begin now. That's how and that's where this relationship starts. It's now we have to choose. You can't just back your way into heaven. You can't back your way into a relationship with God. Instead, it's a choice. It's very deliberate. It's something we have to determine we want to do and choose to do. What are we going to do about that? And sometimes when the way gets kind of rough and where it just seems just really hard to follow and to serve God, and sometimes it is, we can know and understand that God will see us through. And that as our faith grows, as it will when we are listening to his word, as our faith grows, we will be better apt and prepared to walk with him and to serve him in every way. But we have to choose to do that. Have you? Have you made that choice to walk with him, to serve him? Have you made the choice to become a child of God, a baptized believer, one whose sins have been washed away? Have you done just that? Are you walking with him? Today, can we help you in some way to make your life right in the eyes of God? Would you come as we sing to encourage?